Once upon a time, long, long ago, some 400 years ago, to be more or less exact, there lived a merry monarch, a monarch who realized full well the importance of good food to the inner man. And being a man of action and good sense, this monarch therefore kept the inner man well fed. Truly, it could be said that this kingdom was founded. Now, this had a cook who was famed far and wide for the tempting products of his culinary art. His reputation had been firmly established. His place in life was secure. But this cook was not content with his place in life. He was not content to leave well enough alone. He had to experiment with something new, a thing of flour and milk and sweetening and eggs and butter and fats and spices. A thing he called a new type of cake. Not at all like the cakes which the king was familiar, the tiny flat cakes of which he was so fond, but a huge, round, tall cake. This was no small thing to trifle with the king's tastes, to try to change his habits. Indeed, the cook had baked the first true cake, but the cook was also risking his only neck. What would the king make of this new type of cake, this daring cook's experiment? The cook was risking his honorable position, his place in life, his very life itself. What would come of it? But the cook had gambled and won. Here was history in the cake making, fame and fortune, the envy and the admiration of all men. And from that day on, the crown of every happy occasion is a cake. Down through the years have come other experiments and changes, as in the 16th century spice cake, the 17th century Banbury cake, and the 18th century nun's cake. But no matter what the shape or content, the cake proved a triumph on every occasion. Well, almost every occasion. Today, with the modern development of baking, we have special cakes of all kinds to fit different occasions. Cakes that are made with such skill by your neighborhood baker. Cakes always conveniently available to you. Sparkling icings and the art of your baker's delicate decorations add beauty and dignity. A beautiful cake is the highlight of every joyful occasion. A party cake, a cake to announce an engagement, to celebrate an anniversary, or to delight the children on their birthdays. A beautiful cake contributes to your happiness and the happiness of all around you. But sometimes women have had difficulty in achieving a perfect cake. Cake recipes, in the old general cookery terms, have been difficult for the untrained person to interpret. What does cream the shortening and sugar mean? What stage is light and fluffy? How do you blend completely? What does it mean to fold in egg whites? Terms such as these were often confusing. As a result, some housewives had good luck with their baking at times, but results were unsure. Others never made a perfect cake. The time was ripe for further experimentation. Betty Crocker and her staff had already given years of service to homemakers, and the idea was born that cakes could be made easier and better. They started experimental work on a new method. Full use was made of the modern age to accurate measurement, for accurate measurement is basic in all good baking. Hundreds of actual tests were made. Careful records were kept of variations in the proportion of ingredients and variations in the process of mixing, both by hand and by machine. Hundreds and hundreds of cakes were baked. The cakes were closely compared for texture, tenderness, volume, general appearance, and above all, eating quality. From these months and months of testing, a new home method was developed. As a final check, the recipes for this new Betty Crocker method were sent to hundreds of homemakers from coast to coast for them to try in their own kitchens to compare with cakes made by the old method. They baked cakes with the old method and with the new method and reported back to Betty Crocker. The replies showed an overwhelming preference for the new method. The new 4-minute cake recipes are wonderful. You certainly have revolutionized cake making. Your new speedy soft-to-silk recipes delight me. Yes, homemakers approved. And now let me introduce a well-known home economist, Marion Ralston of Betty Crocker's staff, who will demonstrate this new method.
Hello, everybody. Our new Betty Crocker method is a streamlined method. There is no laborious creaming of the shortening and sugar, and no separate beating of the eggs or egg whites, and only one bowl and beater or spoon to wash. All the dry ingredients go in together, and yet it's not the old muffin method of mixing used in busy day or lazy daisy cakes. This new method of mixing is different. The proportion of ingredients is different. The resulting cake is far superior. For some time now, we've had the efficiency of modern kitchen equipment, the dependability of high-quality ingredients, and the science of standardized measurements. To these, the Betty Crocker method adds a fourth factor necessary for perfect cakes, a standardized and exact procedure for blending ingredients, which reduces actual mixing time to just 4 minutes. Now, you all know there are certain basic preparations we make before starting to mix a cake by any method. First, we are careful to have all our ingredients at room temperature, about 70 to 75 degrees, so they will blend readily. The shortening is kept at room temperature, so it's soft but not melted. Before we prepare the pans or measure the ingredients, we turn on the oven and set the regulator at 350 degrees, so the oven will be at the required temperature when the batter is ready. And now about the pans. We use deep layer pans, 1 1/4 inches deep, as we like nice full cake layers. However, and this is important, any layer cake pan should be only half full, so if you have shallow pans, bake a little of the batter as cupcakes, for if the pans are too full, the batter will run over in the oven. And now we grease and flour the pans. We are careful to grease them very thoroughly, sides as well as the bottom. We dust the pans lightly with flour. When pans are prepared in this way, cakes can be removed easily. And now to answer a question that may be in your mind. Can old recipes be used in making new method cakes? The answer is no. You must use recipes especially developed for this new method of cake making. The proportion of ingredients in most old recipes will not work. And now we're going to make one of these new method cakes, the silver white layer cake. We have already assembled all the necessary utensils. and all the ingredients. And always remember, it takes quality ingredients to make a quality cake. So I'm using fresh eggs and milk, a high-grade vegetable shortening, and a high-quality cake flour, especially milled to give cakes of finest eating quality. The first step in the new method is the same as for all cake making. Sift the flour before measuring. Hold the sifter well above the paper. This serves to aerate the flour. Then, spoon the sifted flour lightly into a standard measuring cup. Heat the flour. Then level it with a straight-edged knife. When filling the cup, be careful not to shake it or knock it, or the flour will pack down. The recipe for the silver white cake is in our new method cake bulletin. It calls for 2 1/4 cups of sifted cake flour. This recipe calls for 4 teaspoons of double-action baking powder. As with all modern recipes, the measurements are level, and we use standard measuring cups and spoons. A teaspoonful means a level teaspoonful. Exact measurements are as necessary for us in cake making as for a druggist in filling a prescription. And we add 1 teaspoonful of salt. Granulated sugar is also apt to pack down, so spoon it lightly into the cup. Notice in this new method we add the sugar to the flour and other dry ingredients in the sifter. That's quite different from the old creaming method. We are using 1 1/2 cups of sugar. The flour, baking powder, salt, and sugar are now sifted together into the bowl. And all of you who shun dishwashing, please note, only 1 mixing bowl in this new method. Next, measure the shortening. The silver white cake recipe calls for 1/2 cup of high-grade vegetable shortening. You see, at room temperature, the proper type of shortening is soft and easy to handle, but not melted. In measuring shortening, press it firmly into the measuring cup, and of course, measure level. The shortening is added without creaming. This is another way the new method differs from the old method. And now we're ready to measure the milk. We like to use a liquid measuring cup with the extra rim above the 1 cup mark. It's especially helpful in measuring a full cup of liquid as we're doing in this recipe. Remember that the appearance of the level in looking down at a cup may be misleading. So the only accurate check is the one made at eye level. The flavoring is measured in a measuring spoon and added to the milk. Now add the liquid directly to the dry ingredients in the shortening, another step which distinguishes the Betty Crocker method. In the recipe, we're adding 2/3 of the liquid before mixing. Some new method recipes call for all the liquid at this time, so be sure to follow them closely. Now the ingredients may be mixed either in an electric mixer, as we are doing, or by hand. You'll find that hand mixing is equally satisfactory. Be sure to note the time the mixing is begun. The first mixing period requires 2 minutes. Start the electric mixer at slow speed so the flour mixture won't scatter. Then, as the dry ingredients become moistened, increase the speed to medium. On the sides and the bottom of the bowl to make sure all the ingredients are completely blended. Now, at the end of 2 minutes, the mixture is a smooth batter. Add the remaining 1/3 cup of liquid. Now we measure the eggs. Are you surprised that we measure eggs? Well, you see, eggs vary in size, and so measuring them is the only way to ensure the correct amount. For this recipe, we are using 1/2 cupful, the whites of 4 large eggs. Add the egg whites unbeaten. Again, this is a variation from the old standard procedure. Beat the mixture for exactly 2 more minutes, making a total mixing time of only 4 minutes. What a difference that is from the old conventional method. Then pour the batter into the greased and floured pans. Notice how thin the batter is, but don't be alarmed, it's not a mistake. Batters made by this new method are usually thin. The pan should be just half filled. If the pans are too full, the batter may run over in the oven. You remember before we started the cake, we turned on the oven, so it's now at the correct temperature. Place the pans on a rack just below the center of the oven. Replace the 2-layer pans in opposite corners and in a little from the sides and back of the oven. And don't peek while the cake is baking. When the minimum baking time is up, touch the top lightly. If the surface springs back and no impression remains, the cake is done. Let the cake cool for a few moments before taking it out of the pan. To remove the cake, carefully loosen it from the pan at one side. Turn the pan around to let in the air. Then turn it onto a wire rack to cool. Be sure to let the cake cool thoroughly before frosting it. A luscious, creamy icing adds the finishing touch to a beautiful cake. And now to summarize. The new Betty Crocker method of cake making has 3 main advantages. First, I'm sure you'll all agree it saves time and work. Only 4 minutes to mix, no laborious creaming of shortening and sugar, and no separate beating of eggs. Second, the new method is more exact. There's no question about the meaning of terms. The directions are concise, and the mixing is definitely timed. And last, and most important, the new Betty Crocker method produces superior cakes with especially fine texture. Cakes deliciously moist with a tender, melt-in-the-mouth eating quality. the pink maraschino party cake, the gold cake, the cocoa divinity cake, the silver white cake, the chocolate and white marble cake. Cakes beautiful to look at and delicious to eat. Cakes you can be proud of.
Yes, cakes fit for a king. The generations of cake making, the 400 years of cake history, reaching fulfillment in today's 4-minute new Betty Crocker method.